Hi, welcome to Barmy Army Isolation Podcast number 13. Unlucky for some, and it might just be unlucky for one of our guests tonight. I'm joined by Fiona and by Jake. How are you both doing? Fiona, how's the last week or so been?
Yeah, it's been okay. It's good to have football back. It's been a bit stressful at work, but yeah, now a bit of Premier League football, a bit of controversy in that. Maybe,
Yeah, 45 minutes and we've already got a bit of drama going on there. But yeah, and I know I've already asked you, but because some people might want to know, crowd noise or no crowd noise when you watch or listen to the game, would you say?
crowd noise.
Crowd noise. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm all right. Yeah, just getting through it. Counting down the weeks to when the WSL restarts, and we're hopefully back watching the girls. But we'll see.
Hopefully, and actually, thank you for that, Jake, because you've allowed me to segue seamlessly into a bit of news for you all. That today, Nat and I did a pre-recorded podcast with Deb from the FSA, and that's hopefully going to be available tomorrow as both a video and an audio broadcast on our usual platforms. I'm sure it'll be on social media where you can see it. And we were talking a little bit about the growth of the game, a little bit about some of the questions that people had submitted to us. But towards the end, we talked about Project Restart, but also the women and how that ties in. And yeah, there's not a lot we can hold on to at the moment that's certain, but we're focusing and looking forward up to the time where we can hopefully all be at grounds and games again. Whenever that may be, but there's different stories and information coming out all the time. So do make sure you catch up with that. Good evening to John. Good evening to Mark. Thank you for joining us. So we're now 13 weeks into these podcasts. Forgive me. Subjects are getting a little bit strained, okay? There's not a lot happening. The drama levels are really low. So tonight we're going to have a think about the departures that we've already had announced. So we've got 3 of those. And we're also just going to have a little think about the women's game and a bit about our history, because one of the things that always comes out for me, and I know Nat and I talk about this quite a lot, is the cross-section of fans that we have, how everybody brings a different experience and a different expectation. So depending on how long we get on that, depending on how long Jake takes really to talk about one of the departures, well, depending on what we've got with that. So let's start off. We've currently had 3 players released, or good evening, Natalie, or let go, however we want to term it, who've left the first team squad, as we would class it. I know there's a couple of players that have left the dev squad, but focusing on those players, the first one was Aurora Mickelson. Safe to say, not a surprise, Jake?
I'd say it is a surprise in the sense that it was her, because I knew we were going to get rid of either 1 or 2 goalkeepers. That's not a surprise, but the fact that we brought her in last summer, I thought she'd be here for a few more seasons at least, and we try and develop her. And the fact that she only had 1 game, it just really surprised me. But look, it hasn't worked out for her, and not much else we can say about her.
Yeah, we are limited. Obviously, we've got very little opportunity to see her. Fiona, what are your thoughts on her leaving the club?
Yeah, it sounds like she's just leaving at the end of a contract. So maybe rather than signing her a new contract with her and having 5 keepers and maybe not being able to get rid of anybody, it seems a sensible decision. She hasn't had a lot of game time, but that's just because Mary is kind of the number 1 and very firm number 1. And yeah, not a surprise really.
It was a deal that, for me, I think we were, I won't say forced into, but we had to sign a keeper, I think. And I know that she was training with us while we were out in Oslo, but we had injuries to a couple of keepers. So Fran Bentley, Emily Ramsey, they were injured, and long-term injuries as well at that point. And also Shiv, we knew then was pregnant. So we were down to the bones with our keepers. So we had to bring somebody in. And I don't think we were looking, certainly if you look at the dev squad, for Alex Everett to make that jump. So we were going to have to bring somebody in. But there is a sense that if we had let's use her some more. I know she played for the devs. Nat's saying much the same as Mark. We didn't have the games to blood her. John as well, just not given the chance. And I know I have made the point in the past on the social especially, but I think the cup draw, one of the cup draws against City, drawing City, I should say, in the FA Cup, I think had we drawn lower level opposition then, we'd have likely played more of the fringe players. And we'll come on to certainly one of those shortly. But I think in a way that draw for us, pulling City out, as always, as it was last season, that really hampered our chances of giving some of the fringe players a chance. But yeah, shame, because I know that Torren and Ellen, I don't know if they're joining us this evening. I think they're otherwise occupied. But our Norwegian branch of the Barmy Army, they're very, very clear that she's well thought of out in Norway. So they were hoping that she could really impose herself and make herself a regular. But unfortunately, it's not to have been. John's made the point. Could we have used Aurora like the men used Sergio Romero for cup games? Yeah.
Maybe if we'd had the easier draw, like you say. I think also we probably were looking for somebody that had decent enough quality but was relatively cheap, considering we'd have 5 keepers in the squad. So
we always knew there was going to be at least one keeper going, right? This summer, at least one. Yeah. Okay. So next player to go, bit of a surprise for me, Amy Palmer. Wasn't a player who I thought we were going to release this year. I thought it was somebody we were looking at for the future, and had been out on loan, came back off loan, and almost swapped places with Molly Green. So she came back, Molly went out on loan, and there were a couple of games where I know obviously we didn't have much of the season after Amy Palmer came back, but there were a couple of games where we thought she would have got on as a substitute. That didn't happen, and now either she's been released, she's chosen not to renew a contract. What were your thoughts around that, Fiona?
Yeah, so I think it is a shame, but I do wonder, like you said, whether she's chosen not to renew rather than we've released her. Obviously, she's played for us quite well in the championship. You know, there's potential there. A young player coming through, gone to the championship, got quite a bit of experience there. But at her age, she does need to get game time, like Nat says. And so if she's just going to sit on the bench for us, while we do need cover, she'd be probably quite good cover for Hayley Ladd. That's not really helping her development. So yeah, if it's her choice to leave to do that, then I say good on her. It is a bit of a surprise because otherwise, how have we got to cover for Hayley Ladd? That's the only concern for me.
Yeah, to me, she's a more direct replacement or competition for Hayley Ladd. She's not necessarily going to be pushing Jackie or Katie out of their positions. Jake, what were your thoughts when Amy was released or let go or didn't renew?
Well, if you asked me before any of the players got released who would go, I would sort of be a bit 50-50 on Amy Palmer going, because look, the problem was, I'm not saying she's a bad player at all, because I think, you know, some of the members have gone and seen her play on loan for Sheffield and they were impressed with her. But I feel a bit sorry for her in the fact that we brought Jackie and Hayley in, and you've got so many midfielders to fill 4 or 5 spaces. It's just not going to go in. So it was good to see her go out on loan, as I say. But then when we brought her back and then weren't playing her, I thought something was a little bit wrong there. Obviously, I'm not one to question Casey's decisions, but I would have liked to see her play maybe more this season, maybe stake a claim for a starting place next season. But I'm a little bit disappointed that she's had to leave, whether that be, you know, as you say, the contract not being renewed or her being released, whichever. I
think as much there's another element that's not helped Amy Palmer here as much as Aurora had the cup draw that didn't help her perhaps get as much game time. And I think, yes, Rebecca May was on the bench ahead of her, certainly for the Brighton and the Reading games. But had the season carried on to its natural conclusion, and we'll never know the answer to this potentially, would Amy Palmer have had more game time? because you're thinking, don't bring her back off loan if you're just going to sit her not even on the bench. People always talked about her potential. Nat makes the point though that maybe we will see the devs come through though. Maybe we will look at what we've got in reserve a little bit more. So first two names to be released, let go, whatever the terminology is, different for everybody. And then came one that, Jake, I'm just going to let you take the lead on this one. I think it's safe to say we were expecting it, literally, by if nothing else for just lack of game time. But why should we have kept Lizzie Arnott, Jake? Go on.
Because she's a legend. Because well, obviously you need more than legend status. I feel like this season she struggled, and that's the main issue. Like obviously she was third choice behind Kirsty and Leah. So Lizzie does, she can play on either wing, and she's very quick. She can score goals, as we saw against Leicester, that brilliant goal in the 11-1 win. But she like Amy, she was really limited for game time. She didn't go out on loan, so she was sitting on the bench for a lot of the games, which is disappointing. But look, even as Lizzie's biggest fan, I'll hold my hands up and say she wasn't competition for Kirsty and Leah. Now, as much as I would have liked her to stay, and as much as my heart breaks for her, it's something that I'm gonna have to accept. It's not nothing that we can change. And all we have is memories of her. And let's not forget, she had a really good season last season. Last season's in the championship season, that is. And I hadn't seen or heard anything of her when United formed, but instantly she's one of those players who caught my eye in the early days. The game against Sheffield, the first game we played LSV against them. I think she was brilliant in. Played well against Charlton a few games later as well. So she instantly caught my eye. She had a really good run in the team, and yeah, forever part of the history.
Jake, there's one thing you didn't mention, and it's the one thing. I know you mentioned about history, but in 50, 100, however many years' time from now, if the United women's team's still going, whatever they do, Lizzie Arnott's name will always, always be the answer to a quiz question. And nobody will ever take that away from her. We will have players come and go. We will have great players, mediocre players, whatever. Nobody will ever take that moment from Lizzie Arnott. And I have to give you credit because I think you've always been clear about who your favourites are, but you've also been very honest about them. You're not blind to maybe where they've lacked or where they might have struggled at times. And yeah, I'm just going to give you huge credit for that. I'll give you a break. I'll bring Fiona in for a moment just to talk about it while you gather yourself again. Fiona, what were your thoughts on Lizzie leaving?
I don't think it was a surprise. There's obviously a lack of game time, and if she wants to get into the Scottish national team squad, she needs to be playing regular. And also, if Siggy, who's a striker, has been playing on the right wing rather than her, then she's probably got the hint that maybe she isn't of a high enough standard for us. And it's not for lack of trying. She's a very committed player. There are other players that have got the skill but don't then have the desire like she does. So she'll always fight for the team. See when she comes on, when she's starting as a sub, she did try. But yeah, I think as well, sometimes she's just, if you look at Siggy and you look at Hansen, Casey likes a strong winger, and maybe Lizzie wasn't that. So yeah, I think she'll always go down in history for the club. She'll always be remembered. But I think it's probably right for both.
Yeah, physically, I know Mark and I would often say it looks like she could have been blown over by a strong gust of wind, and that's her physique. That's what she's playing with. But I think also, yeah, the game time, the getting into the national squad, and just wanting to. Casey always said about Lizzie, and I remember this really early on, she was one of the most hardworking players she'd ever had. And I think sometimes you find, not always, it's not an exclusive at all, but often that players work hard. Not sort of get you look at someone like Ronaldo. He's a great player and he works extremely hard. But if you're lacking a little bit of quality, you often have to work that bit harder. It doesn't come as naturally to you. And Lizzie, I think, always got. She's always had a great work ethic while she's been with United, but it just wasn't enough to make a good enough lasting impression in the Super League. Jake, I'm going to ask you a question about Lizzie, because I know you're a fan, watched her play, possibly seen her with, rose-tinted glasses sometimes. Could she do a job for another Super League team, do you think? Or is she a Championship player?
Well, I've got to say, the gap between the WSL and the Championship, in my opinion, is massive. Take out, Aston Villa and Sheffield United. I think any WSL team could beat the rest of the Championship. So I think Lizzie is much better than Championship standard. I think she can grow into the WSL in a new team. But whether she does that or goes back home to Scotland, we'll have to see what happens. But I think for a team slightly below us, maybe an Everton or a Spurs, she can do well there. Because let's not forget that there are also teams like to play a little bit like us on the attack, like to commit numbers, like to go forward with fast wingers. And if a gap appears at one of those teams, I'm sure they'll definitely look at Lizzie as an option at least. But I just hope it's not the last time we've seen her.
Yeah, she's thrown a little bit of shade at Spurs and Everton there. Nicely done there, Jake. Obviously, whenever a former player comes back, if they've left under positive circumstances, as much as you can have that, it's not been acrimonious or anything, then we will always welcome them back. And obviously, as we develop as a team and get more and more seasons under our belt, we are going to have more and more players coming back. And I know some people gave Ebony Salmon perhaps a little bit more support than some of us thought she should have had, Natalie. But if Lizzie does go to another Super League team or even a Championship team who we draw in a cup or we go to them, then we will always give Lizzie maximum respect and thank her for her role in Man United's history. Have you got over it now, Jake?
I'm still in the process. But let me just say, if we do go to a team and Lizzie's playing for the opposition, I can't make any promises that I won't be shouting her name all match.
I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to get a load of hassle for it, but I'm going to say it because I'm saying what I think. I think for her role in our history, what am I saying about you, Nat? I'm saying that we gave Ebony too much love and support. I think at the beginning of a game, if Lizzie's on the opposition, I think I can almost expect that a small core of us would sing a song for her. Have a moment, right? Thank you. 90 minutes, you're opposition, but before that game, she'd get some appreciation from us. So I don't know. Maybe everyone's going to tell me I'm wrong, and I'll be singing. I'll be singing with you, Jake. I think you'd join me. So yeah, absolutely. But
as long as it's before the 90-minute start.
Hey, I'm not going to sing for an opposition player during night. Who would do that? Who would do anything? So, oh yeah, that's right, Nat. You.
I can't make promises. Just saying, no promises from me as of yet.
You know what, Jake? We'll let that one slide. 3 departures named. The transfer window opens in a couple of days. Opens on Friday. So I guess we're talking departures before arrivals. Would you both think the same, Jake?
Yeah, I still think we've got another 2, maybe 3 departures to go. Look, as much as I wouldn't like to see anyone go, I can think of a few players who might be at risk, shall we say. And of course, it's not just Lizzie. Whenever a player leaves, there is a part of me that will really miss them. Okay, John.
No, he's telling that because you know what? Oh. I'm getting these. Nat says just at the start we can sing for Lizzie, and as Nat's prone to saying about absolutely anybody, she's her G. But bottom line in terms of Lizzie, we respect every single one of the original 21, providing they left positively. Sorry, Jake, you were saying there about you're expecting up to 3 more departures potentially.
either 2 or 3. I think there are some players who are possibly at risk, and we don't know how many signings Casey's wanted to bring in as well, because obviously you see the rumour online of certain names here and there, and positions that we need to fill, but we don't know. Like, for example, I think we made more signings than I expected last summer. Like, I wasn't expecting 2 goalkeepers. I think I'd say some of the signings last season were a little bit of a surprise. So maybe Casey will sign a few more. I think was it 7 that we signed last summer?
So I had 6 in my head, but it might be someone will correct me and tell me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I mean the 2 keepers, we were hamstrung on one of them. So I think there was. I always sounds awful to say it, but I almost count the extra keeper as not a signing because it was an emergency. But yeah, there were a lot that came in, and I often wonder what impact the virus will have on signings, because obviously in terms of getting players for medicals, getting players into different countries, that's a hassle in itself. Fiona, what are your thoughts on how many more may come in and how many more may go out, before there's incomings?
Yeah, I think there's definitely still at least 1 or 2 that I can see going, and any more than that, I would think it'd be like a 1 in, 1 out kind of situation.
Yeah.
Kind of, if we've managed to sign a player in that position that's an upgrade, then maybe we'll release somebody. Whereas I think there's certain people that we'll probably release. Looking at goalkeepers, for example, we've now got 4 left.
Yeah.
That's still quite a lot. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting, particularly because a lot of WSL teams have had to release players or end of contract. But also quite a few people have now signed like a 1-year extension. So it could be the case of we'll keep some players for another year, and next season, when it ends, we can get some people on a free. United might think that's good financial sense. Yeah, there's lots of people on a free now, so we could see that happen as well. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, particularly today they've announced what's happening with the Champions League. So obviously that's going to cause issues for certain players signing contract extensions till the end of August, which if the season starts in September, maybe the Champions League is their pre-season. But Casey probably wouldn't be happy with that if she's not managed to have much training time with them. But we all have to see how that goes.
Yeah, Jake, Mark has borne you out as correct. There were 7. Mary, Lotta, Hayley, Jackie, Jane, Abby, and Aurora. But 6 if you don't count the extra keeper. So yeah, thank you for that, Mark. The Champions League thing's an interesting one because, as you say, that could be some players pre-season, but that's with a different team. So you've got some players who will sign effectively like an extra month or 2 extension. Then they would become available once their team either wins or loses in the Champions League. But they'd then have a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe. It seems like if you're pitching for any player who's going to be competing in the Champions League, you're almost saying we're not going to have them for probably till the beginning of October, maybe, because it depends when they get their break. Yes, I know they're all off now, but they're going to have to come back for their existing clubs. So they're going to have a pre-season then play this mini tournament. Effectively, is what Champions League for women, men, and men's Europa, as they've become, and then leave that club and then go to a new club after their new club has had a full pre-season together.
Well, they'll be match fit.
There is that.
But if they're having to move country, it's going to be a logistical nightmare. Having to pack up everything. There's like Leon players that like Lucy Bonds going back to WSL, that's going to be a right pain for her if she stays for the Champions League. So maybe they don't stay with their club. But why would you pass up on the chance in the Champions League? So yeah, they'll be match fit, but they won't understand Casey's tactics maybe as much than others.
So then that possibly reassesses If you're a manager, you'd possibly be thinking, maybe I'll stick to players who are available now. And therefore, and this could kick something off on social media, are we pitching at players? Are we looking to bring in players who perhaps aren't at the Champions League stages, aren't at the quality of a Champions League semi-final, the quarters, semis, final, but instead we're going into slightly lower level? Mark's made the point. Ryan Fraser, a name you possibly you're not familiar with, certainly Jake. He has chosen not to extend his contract. So even though the men's season is going to be playing into July, he's chosen not to do that. So as you said, Fiona, they will have the choice, I think they have the choice anyway, whether to extend or not to extend. But that's going to cause mayhem for next season.
Well, apparently some players don't want to sign contract extensions because what happens if they become injured and then they're released at the end of the contract? That's going to obviously hamper them joining a new club. Whereas if they've only got, I think it's only like 3 or 4 games in the Champions League,
yes,
they might see it as being less of a risk. And also, it's the Champions League.
Well, but I wonder as well, something you were saying there has made me think, if you're buying a player, let's say you're in negotiations with a player, you have been for a couple of weeks, maybe a month now, season's ended, so you're thinking, right, well, we'll do our business now. I wonder whether there's going to be any buying teams or teams that players are moving to who actually say, if you play because of the risk of injury, we're going to null and void your contract because you're in breach of it. Because as well, what's the start date for their contract? If the start date for their contract is August 1st because of pre-season, so this virus has just turned the whole world upside down, honestly. Oh, but yeah, those are things that, look, we can only dream of having those issues because then we'd still be in the Champions League. But maybe for the future. Looking forward to a Euro away at some point, Jake?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Imagine, hold on, a Euro away could be as close as City away, or it could be some Russian team. I mean, I don't know which women's Russian teams are in the Champions League, but it could be.
Jake, if it's a Belarusian women's team.
Oh, it could be FC Minsk women.
You're the expert. All we're going to do, Jake, is just say, you're in charge. Tell us where to go, boss. You're in charge, Jake.
Right. Okay. I need to warn you now, my geographical knowledge of Minsk isn't great.
That makes 2 of us. Okay, no pressure, Jake. No pressure for a Euro away in Belarus. Okay?
Right.
You'll have the language sorted as well? Because if not, Nat's multilingual. I'm sure he can.
I don't need to worry then.
Nat's got us covered for Spain.
Nat's definitely got us covered for Spain. She's really good as well for someone who shares a birthday on Christmas as well. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that one there. Maybe we'll all be speaking Spanish over the next few weeks. Maybe. Who knows? Okie dokie. I think we've pretty much exhausted the players who've gone. What I'm not doing, and if anybody wants to throw names at us, then please do. I'm not asking for who we think is going or who we think should go, okay? Because if there's one thing football teaches us, there'll always be a surprise in there. Because I thought the goal line technology worked, and I've seen tonight it clearly doesn't. So if anybody wants to throw some names, by all means, please do. But we're going to try and be fair and respectful this evening. What I thought we'd spend some time doing, like I say, we're 13 weeks into this, the barrel's being scraped here a little bit. But while I've got you both, because I'm very aware that you've both got very different experiences of watching football, and also following Manchester United. And I thought it would be interesting if we could just, and again, anybody who's watching, let's get some comments on this. What your experience of Manchester United and what your experience of women's football are, because I've always said quite openly, I come at Manchester United as a fan of the men's team. And I grew up, I knew Manchester United from day dot. It was one of the first things I was aware of. I knew that football existed, and if there was football, it was Manchester United. even though I had half of my mum's side of the family are Blues, my dad's side were Reds. But I've got an older brother, so I copied everything he did. And some things were pretty good, actually. He got some things right. So for me, Manchester United was always the men's team. And quite often, I got the odd ticket to Old Trafford. Latterly, I've had a season ticket. But women's football wasn't something I necessarily watched a lot of. I remember watching some of the games from the World Cup in Canada. And I remember when the FA Cup final was always on, BBC would always show that. But my experience of women's football really picked up once United got involved. And we always ask the question, why was there no women's team? But Fiona, you've got a very different experience of women's football, because I'm a Johnny come lately. You've been doing this for years. So what's your background then into the game?
So I've always been a United fan since I was a little kid. But I remember asking my mum, can I get a season ticket for Old Trafford? And she would always go, no, too expensive. So that never happened. But I've always followed United, listened to them on the radio when the games were on, that kind of thing. Probably fell out of love with it a little bit, but still followed the team, but I wasn't necessarily reading all the stats and all that kind of stuff. And I've also been always interested in women's football. I remember when I was maybe like 10 or 12, like going with guides to go and watch, or brownies going watching the football. I think it was like £1 to get in, and you just had to pay for your coach trip, that kind of thing. And then when the WSL started, I was interested in it, but I didn't really have a club. United didn't have a team, so who was that to support? So I just kind of watched it, interested in who the England players were, but didn't particularly follow the squad. And yeah, interested in the Lionesses. Well, they were just called England at that point. But yeah, followed them, watched their games in Canada on the TV. Been to a few of the games in Manchester. But didn't travel down to London to watch them or anything. And then saw United having a women's team. I was like, great. Now I need a season ticket, and that was it. There, all the games I could get to at home. Gone to some away games now. And yeah, just love it again.
You were one of those who went to women's games, club games, but you never took a team, did you?
Yeah, so I've been to the Academy Stadium when City are playing Arsenal, for example, because that's a good competitive game. I wouldn't necessarily go and watch City play, I don't know, somewhere like Bristol, probably guaranteed goals, but it just didn't interest me as much. Whereas City versus Arsenal, there'd be some Lionesses players there, be a good game and that kind of thing. But yeah, I never really had a team to support. It was just watching a match.
Because we know we've got some fans, certainly in the Barmy Army, but in the United fan base, who, in the absence of a United team, did take another team, which has always, I've never quite understood that, but maybe that's my issue. Jake, good evening, Jonathan, before you bombard me with messages. Jake, what's your experience or your history with the women's game and United, for that matter?
Now, I like to think that mine is sort of a mix of what both you have said. So I grew up in a United supporting household for the men, obviously. And that's because my dad had something, well, he lived on the same street as a United legend, Steve Coppell. Well, I'm sure both of you know him. So I was brought up discovering football through United men. And, growing up, I did watch them. However, I just started to fall out of love with the game a little bit, and that sounds terrible, especially to some of you watching who will very strongly support the men. But I did sort of fall out of love bit by bit, and I noticed myself becoming more of a neutral in the men's game. So women's football, I started watching it it was just before Euro 2013, which admittedly didn't go too well for England. If I remember correctly, it didn't even get out of the group. So yeah, that was a good introduction. But I was watching the Lionesses and the home nations for the women for quite a few years, and then in the 17-18 season, when BT started pushing WSL more on TV, that's when I took an interest. Now, that was the season before we were formed, obviously. And yeah, I just started watching it more, getting to know the players, and that's when my interest in the women's league really started taking off. Now, I've got to say, Deborah, you made the point of some members of the Barmy Army used to support other teams. Now, I wasn't one of them, but Everton literally played 10 minutes down the road from me a few years back in over in Widnes. And I could have gone to any of their games and become an Everton fan subsequently, but I never did, I never actually thought I'll go out to the games. It was always just a case of watching them on TV. Now, how I got involved with United is another sort of a crazy story, if you like. I used to work in Leigh, and it was around the time that, it was the time of our first few home games. So on that evening that we played Sheffield United in the league, I was literally overworked, 5-minute walk away. So I thought, it's £5 a ticket, let's walk over, let's watch. And it was something different. It felt like a real community there, even though I didn't speak to many people. The girls really put the effort in, even though they'd only been together for a matter of weeks, maybe a few months. And you could really see, this is a team that wants to go places, fronted obviously by an England legend in Alex Greenwood, managed by another England legend in Katie Stoney. So there was players that I knew there, and it just went from there. So I combined the United identity of my family with just enjoying the game.
But you were always United. I'm just going to stop you there for a minute, Jake, because my brother's got me into trouble here. So, John, I was actually referring to my brother when I said Jonathan will bombard me with messages. John, I wasn't having a go at you. Please continue to send me messages, because they'll be far more sensible and appropriate than the ones my brother will send me. But hello, Max. I won't let that one go without saying. So you both had an interest in the game, but never picked another team. See, because if anybody can give me a comment on this, I can't get that. Because I think if you're a red, you're a red. You can't pick another team. I've never. And had you gone to watch Everton, that could have been the same as Fiona, who went to go and watch City play, but not as a City fan. So it would have been your local game. I know we've got clubs near to where we live, nearest where I am, and I will occasionally go and see their games. Perhaps if it's a weekend United aren't playing, or whatever reasons, and I will observe their results. But I'm a United supporter, so I think with women's football, maybe United not having a team has changed those boundaries. But you both say you come from an attitude of I'm a red, that's me, no matter what. Nat's a red. In case we didn't know.
Sheffield also play in red.
There's lots of teams that play in red, aren't there? Yeah.
But it's like how people have been watching the German football, or there was some South Korean football on at the moment. It's watching a match. You don't always have to support who's playing.
Yeah. So Jake, you could have gone to Widnes, we'd have forgiven you. You'd have still been allowed to come and stand on the back with us and come out with all your wonderful songs and flags.
Exactly. But sorry, can I just come in a second?
Go, please.
My whole point is, had I gone to Widnes, I honestly think I'd be an Everton fan today. And I hate to say that, but it's the whole thing of, my first game was so special for me. So had that first game been at one at Widnes, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't be here today. But let's just be grateful that I am, even though I do have some interesting opinions and interesting favourites.
But you know what, Jake? I will take and I'll be complete. And I've said this to you. I will take your opinions over other people's because of the way you put them across, and the way that you will always admit that people may not have played their best, but you will see that you will support them no matter what. But you will be honest, and I think that when people when they follow a sports team or just in anything, if you only ever give an opinion of, this is my opinion, it is right, don't question it, even if a player has a bad game, it's difficult for me to really get on board with that. Whereas if somebody says, do you know what, I really like this person, but they had a crap game, I'm great with that, because I can see that somebody cares about that player, cares about that team. And invariably in sport, you're not going to win every match. So you've got to take some of the negative with the positive. But yeah, so Jake, whatever your opinions are, I'm on board with some of them. I'm on board with you making them. I might not agree with some of them, but I'm on board with some of them. We talked on Sunday on the social about the next thing that I want to ask you about. And again, really interested to know what people think about this. Women's matches in the men's stadia. I've made my point about this on podcasts. I made it on the social on Sunday to you. I'm a big no for a whole raft of reasons. But in terms of growing the game, do we need to have women's games in men's stadia? Or are there other things that could be done to grow the game? Jake, I'll stick you on the spot first.
Yeah, I'm very against it. This is going to sound very negative, but I think putting games in men's stadiums does nothing for the women's game long term. Maybe it'll boost attendance for 1 or 2 matches, but look, 1 month down the line, you're back down to 1,000, if that, in some clubs' cases. Look, it's all nice having a big spectacular and all that, one for the TV cameras, one for media coverage. But what does it actually do? It doesn't do much long term. As well as the start, like for example, if we were to do it and take the girls to Old Trafford, I'm very behind the whole idea of having a home ground and giving it the team sense of identity. And I think at League we've got that. You know, LSD is our fortress in a way, and you've got other teams like Arsenal who play at Meadow Park. Like I can't see them playing in the Emirates. It wouldn't feel right. Chelsea, Kingsmeadow is their ground, and when they played Stamford Bridge that time, not only was it not sold out, it just felt a bit strange, if you like. So I don't think the people in charge should rush to push the women into men's stadiums. I don't think it works.
Yeah, John's agreed with the point. The 30-odd thousand that went to watch the derby, first game of the season, next game, 1,000, 2,000 maybe for City. It doesn't grow. It grows the crowds. It gives you great averages at the end of a season, but it's not a lasting effect, it appears. Fiona, what do you think about United should play at Old Trafford, apparently?
I don't think it should happen, because if people wanted to come and watch Manchester United women, Lee Sports Village has got plenty of space for them to come and stand. We're not selling out. If our stadium was 5,000 and we were always at 5,000 capacity, then you could maybe make an argument. We need to move somewhere bigger, maybe have some of those games at the men's. But that isn't the case. The men's game, playing the games in the men's stadium increases the average, if depending on how the FA calculate the average. And we know one of their goals is to increase attendance over a number of years. So maybe this is an easy way for them to do it. So there's always that point. When we play in men's stadiums, look at what happened with Chelsea. They sold out, and there was lots of empty seats, and they used to claim that they were doing it for data gathering, which is great. So you've emailed all these people now. How many of them actually turn up at the games? That's an interesting point. And also, at the men's stadium, the games are sometimes free tickets. What is your commitment to turn up at that game if it's free? Or they're very cheap, which is fine. You maybe get some like big groups of like football teams or schools, those kind of things. Great for them to have it cheap, but it'll cause an issue at Old Trafford, and we'll just get people coming to see Old Trafford rather than seeing the game. And if they're at the stadium, be supporting the teams that are playing. Come and support United or our opposition. That's fine, but it's not an opportunity to come and look at Old Trafford. If you want to come and look at Old Trafford and you want to experience like what it's like on a normal game day, you're not going to get that if everybody's looking around like, oh look, that's that stand, or oh,
Yeah.
this is what happens here, and oh wow, aren't we far back from the pitch, and all these kinds of things, and that just takes away from everybody's experience. The Barmy Army, we like to sing our song and be loud. If we're trying to, if we're all spread out in Old Trafford, it's just not going to be the same. So yeah, Casey needs to stay strong on this point of playing at LSV.
Do you know what? You've said exactly, the pair of you said exactly what my issues with this are. It's not a lasting impact. You've talked about people wanting to look around and, oh, isn't this amazing? I'm at Old Trafford. If you want a cheap day at Old Trafford, go and do the tour. If you want to go and see what it's like, go and do the tour, or go and try and get a match ticket for the men's game. You can get some games, certainly for the cup games, the early stages of the Carabao, if we're ever at home. I guarantee that's never sold out. So you then dilute us, I think, as a fans group. And I think that you lose the impact we can have in that very small, kind of imposing stadium, smaller as Lee is. And also we're bunched together. At the Etihad, we were too far spread out. We weren't together in a sort of in a clump. We were spread way out, and we couldn't make the noise. So for me, I think we as a fans group, as the noise bringers, we have more impact on the team in a smaller stadium where we can be there. And also, like you say, if people are there, oh, look, isn't this amazing? Watch the game. The players deserve you to focus on them. And it's not, for me, the spectacle is the pitch, not where you are. So it's a conversation, and it's a point that's, you know what, when the season starts again, I guarantee we'll get the same thing again. United should play at Old Trafford. And ultimately, let's face it, it's going to have to happen at some stage, because there will be so much of this from certain places. We will end up backing down on it. But let it be a one-off or a real rarity, because we're far better at Lee. And I actually think, as great as it might be for the team to play at Old Trafford, I'd want us to be able to fill or to get a good crowd at Old Trafford if the girls do play there. Mark's made a good point. Pre-season last year? Yeah, last season. I'm all over the place with timings. Arsenal had a double header. So their women played, I want to say Bayern Munich. Their women played, and then shortly after, their men played. So I think if you had a ticket, you had a ticket for both games. So that seemed to get them over the issue of, you need to have a game at your men's stadium. And also, it got the team on. It got it was part of a double header. Thank you, Mark. So it got their women's team out on a big pitch. Great opportunity for them. Would have given a new fan base an opportunity to see them as well. But not the expectation of, right, we're going to end up with 20,000 of these. Well, we can get 20,000 into Meadow Park. But it was understood almost by doing that we know this is the bit before the Lord Mayor's Parade, almost, if you will. So I won't be averse to United doing that. But who knows what pre-season is even going to look like? And it's not going to be this pre-season. It's next pre-season, at which point we'll probably be having a conversation about how good our pre-season tour was, won't we, Jake?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Come on, pre-season next year. I possibly know the answer to this, but now that United have got a women's team, if that women's team, for whatever reason, stopped as it has done in the past, would you still both watch women's football, Fiona?
I probably would, but maybe not at first. I might need some time to recover. But
Yeah.
I'd probably still watch it. But I probably wouldn't have it. I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't follow a team. It wouldn't cross my mind, because it will just be United. It'd have to be United. But I'd probably still watch it.
Jake, would you go and be an Everton fan?
Oh, no. Look, I've nailed my colours to the mast now. But I definitely still watch women's football, because there's a number of players that I admire, and there's a lot of teams that are exciting. But I honestly, if knowing that United are there, and then suddenly gone. I couldn't just suddenly go and support what would have been one of our rivals. It just wouldn't feel right. So yeah, luckily I can't ever see United's women's team folding again. But look,
you'd like to think now that they've done it, now that they've committed to it, and I think that there was so much. It came out of the conversation with the FSA today that United got so much negative press for not having a women's team. That was one of the reasons they were forced into it. So you'd think that they won't backtrack on that. I know that COVID's going to wreak havoc potentially with clubs going to the wall, and the effects of this will rumble on for a while. But fingers crossed we don't have to think about that, because it won't be the same. Won't be the same. But both of you have got more of a history of the women's games. That's why I was asking. Bearing in mind then your knowledge of the women's game, your history with the women's game, we are talking. Mark was giving me the average attendances today for this last season gone, so our Super League season. And it's fair to say that they're not great. They're pretty shocking, I think. What's stopping the game? What's stopping the women's game from growing? And don't say it's a lack of goals and excitement, because the Premier League's back and we've had a 0-0 to start with. So I'm not buying that we need excitement. Sorry, Jake, what's stopping the women's game from regularly drawing bigger crowds, for one thing?
I think there's a few answers to that question, honestly. For me, the FA are fully focused on the Lionesses, which is all well and good to fill Wembley and fill every stadium they play at. Fair play to them. But they need to put more effort into the league. And I think this whole idea of, let's have a rule where you have to play one game in your men's stadium, it doesn't help, because you've got to do more in terms of promotion. I think as well, I don't want to push too much against the FA, because look, they've got it up against them. The stereotype of women's football in this country isn't great. People are like, oh yeah, it's rubbish, it's low quality. People won't give it a chance like we have. That's the issue. More people just need to give it a chance. And the thing that annoys me most is the fact that the World Cup has a lot of viewers. The World Cup definitely changed some minds on women's football, but I feel like we just failed to capitalise. It's just the attendances have increased slightly for each team, but nothing major.
Mm-hmm. Jake, I completely agree with you, because I know from myself and my point of view, I wasn't compelled to go and watch to see it. If it was on the TV, it was on the TV, but I wouldn't necessarily search it out. And I think the FA, yes, it's easy to attack the FA, but one of these concerns about the national team being the focus too much, I think it's harder as fans then to attach to the rest of the league, unless you're talking about the 20-odd players that are making a national squad. What about everybody else? So I think the FA have got to accept some role in this. Fiona, what do you think's stopping the growth?
As long as there's clashes between the men's and women's team, that's going to severely impact. If you've got a season ticket at Old Trafford costing you a few £100 at least, who are you gonna go and watch? So that's one thing. There'll obviously always be clashes. People going to an away match when the other team are playing at home. It's not always practical, but I think that's one thing. This is not necessarily the FA, but a lot of clubs, they make it quite difficult to find out about information. Sometimes maybe hide the news stories. So if I went onto the Manchester United website, I know where to find the information on the women's, but not necessarily everybody does. Maybe this season we've suffered a little bit in attendance because we haven't been scoring as many goals as last season, particularly on a cold Thursday night. You might not be willing to make that commitment if you're just wanting to come to a one-off game. So I think that's something to bear in mind. And let's be honest, for United, it's LSV's location. We're making it difficult for people to get there. It's really easy for me. It's 10 minutes in the car. But if you've got to get there by public transport, particularly for late kickoffs, or sometimes Sundays are difficult as well. All of these things add up. But also, I think somebody mentioned this on the Sunday social. We'll have a few games and then we'll just have a week off. and it won't be for an international break. It'll just be a week off. And so, as a fan, unless you're actively following your team, when are they playing? That might impact it. Whereas, for the men, they're going to be playing every weekend, or you'll hear about it, like why they're not. So yeah, I think the league is a bit stop and start sometimes. Obviously, it's nice to have breaks throughout the season. Helps people come back from injury and that kind of stuff, rather than trying to squash all the games in just one week after another, make it a very short season. But yeah, I think there's still needs room for improvement, and it's finding that balance. We definitely need to get more people from the men's game coming across. But how do we do that? It's
and yet, there are other clubs who would say that's the last thing that we want. And I'm going to claim credit because I think I said something about the stop-startiness, which isn't a term at all. If anything, that means that casual fans lose interest. Are they playing this week? Are they not playing this week? I don't know. Well, they played last week, but they didn't play last week. So are they playing? There's no, like you say, with the men, it's either an international break or they're playing. We're in a fortunate position, myself and Mark, because yes, we hold season tickets to Old Trafford, but we've also got season tickets for the women. And we make the decision that whenever there is a clash, one of us goes to the men, one of us goes to the women. But that's because it's the two of us together. And I really feel for people who probably have to make that decision based on their finances. And we know that we've got fans who've held season tickets for both and they've given one of them up. So we know it does happen. But one of the other things I mentioned today on the earlier podcast with the FSA was that we also, as well as the postponements, I think the facilities sometimes, but the way that games get shifted about with very late notice, there's a sense then of, yeah, you don't really matter. You're not really that important. Because we get such small crowds, it doesn't really matter if we get anybody in the ground or not. And actually what we're saying is we want to be there. We want to be a part of it. But we're almost not seen as important. But those conversations are happening. That's all I can say to you when we are trying to promote that. Sorry, Fiona, I think you're about to come in with something there.
No, I was just going to say, if the men's team's game's moved, you'll hear about it very quickly, whereas we're often left in the dark for the women. And that's not just United. I know that's other clubs as well.
Yeah, that's across the board. We almost said there should be like a grace period of 2 weeks at the very least. And a game cannot be moved 2 weeks before it's due to kick off. So the City FA Cup game, we knew it was getting moved. We knew it, and they were delaying, and it was the Sunday, and then it was announced as the Saturday. So we'd almost want them to say this game was due to take place on the 23rd of a month, whatever. We cannot move it 2 weeks. There's a 2 week window before that, so the 8th or something. After the 8th, it cannot be moved. So people then know they can make travel plans. They can go and spend money on hotels, on trains, on buses, on coaches, on whatever they need, on flights, as we know some people do. Because if you lose money because a game's been changed at short notice, you may not want to bother coming back. So care for the fans that you've got. That's one thing I think we all deserve. But also, yeah, we need to get more out there. We need to get more done for us as the casual fan. Not us as the casual fan, but for the casual fans, because it's not bad. It's worth coming to see, isn't it? And we miss it.
Yeah,
Jake,
we miss it a lot.
Yeah, what are you most... Oh, gosh. I'm looking at pictures on the TV from the Etihad, and it's absolutely hammering it down. So I think I'll wait for it to find its way over to the north side. Jake, what are you most looking forward to about a return to any football, going to games?
Obviously seeing you lot, the Barmy Army, getting together, singing as we always like doing, going to different grounds, that's always fun. But most importantly, seeing Jay Ross have a breakthrough season.
Yes! Yes!
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Nailed it, Jake. Fiona, what are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to seeing how the team has progressed, and obviously hoping then pushing for Champions League, maybe hopefully soon. So seeing how the squad progresses, how Casey's tactics progresses, and then obviously getting back singing some of our songs.
Yes. I've just got one last question for you both. And I was going to ask this before, and then I thought I'll drop it. Now I'm coming back to it. We talked about the Champions League, the Women's Champions League. We've also talked a little bit about watching international games. If you had a choice, and by all means, I'd love comments on this. If you had a choice between your national team winning the World Cup, and Jake, feel free to pick any of the many national teams you choose, you support or sing for, a national team winning the World Cup or United win the Champions League, what are you going for? Jake?
Is that me?
Hey, I'm putting you straight on the spot.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I might shock a few people here because I do really like the national teams and international football in general. But I'm gonna say United win the Champions League, and that is for one reason only. We have formed such a personal connection with those girls. Our support means the world to them. Whereas the national teams have the whole country behind them. So it would feel more personal and more special in that sense. So, yeah, United to win the Champions League for me.
Do you know what? That's a really great point. I think it would mean more, the connection that we've got means something to us as well as them. So actually, nice point there, Jake. I hadn't thought about it that way. Fiona?
I would love it if the Lionesses won the World Cup because it would be great. The whole country would be cheering. It'd be brilliant. But for me, it's all club winning the Champions League. And it'd be because I've been there from the start. I'll have seen us having some awful 0-0 games or games we've lost, unfortunately. But I've also seen the highs. Can you just imagine Millie celebrating the Champions League? It would just be absolutely great to watch.
Please.
It would just be like brilliant. It would be a great game. We'd be just all there. We'd obviously all have to travel.
Obviously.
Yeah. It would be just great. Couldn't brilliant.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we get back playing and we get into a position where we can start to compete again, and who knows what the next stage is for the United women's team. Who knows what the next stage is for women's football, but let's hope we all get there. And John makes a good point, actually. Here you go. Hadn't thought of this. We're United fans week in, week out. England only every 2 years if we count Euros as well as World Cup. But here we go. There's your travel sorted.
We'll leave it all to Mark.
Captain Mark's piloting the plane, but we'll leave that one to him. Fiona, Jake, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I've really enjoyed it. I know we were talking before we came on air about we're just going to throw something together because it feels like there's not a lot happening. But thank you so much for your thoughts, for your opinions. Jake, keeping the Lizzie love going, aren't we? She'll always be a United legend.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing your time with me this evening. Thank you to everybody who's watched. As ever, don't forget, Sunday Socials will be back on. If anybody wants to join us, drop us a DM. I've mentioned that we also have another podcast out, will be out tomorrow. And if anybody wants to grab some great designs we've got T-shirts of, do it quickly because they are running out. I think they'll be done by, well, I don't know, they could be done within the next hour. So if you want a chance to do that, get on the Twitter and there'll be a link to it. Failing that, I will hopefully see the two of you on the social on Sunday. But everybody else, thank you very much. Take care. And who knows? I'm being told something. What's I saying? Oh, thank you. Fiona, we're an hour later next week, aren't we? Fiona's reminded me that the men play at 6 o'clock next Wednesday. I forgot what day we're on. So the pod will be an hour later. We'll be on at 8 o'clock. Again, don't know who with. Don't know what we'll be discussing, but please join us then. Thanks very much. Good night.